Dawn came clean for once, which felt like an insult after the road we had closed. I stood at the notch with salt still white on my boots and level 6 toughness quiet in my breath. Measures sat in order: toughness, speed, might, toughness, speed, toughness. Renown empty toward the next climb, 28 if the pattern held. Thor favor 3 banked. Odin favor 1. T-Wire favor 1 still riding the unfinished war command on Oath Edge, defend these living decks until Skadi was driven or a living harbor rock released me. Frasier favor 1. Equipped still, Oath Edge and Spirit Sense. Storm Strength rested. Rune Sight rested. Lie Scar known and inert. Path Ward and Hammer Cast known on Thor's path I was not wearing. Narrow Focus and Raven Mark known on Odin's. 2 slots. No third. Ormfinn's son under stone with his name said twice at first light, and the rope ring on Stormbreaker's prow empty on purpose. 9 pale ships waited at the sea gate. That was not a rumor anymore. The headland runners' count had been checked by 2 more eyes before the second dusk died, and the third confirmation came on a fishing skiff that stank of fear and honest tar. Skadi Chaintaker had arrived first to the cork in the bottle. Closing the road of the unburied had cost us the fast approach. We had kept our dead. He had kept the schedule. Plan, Astrid said. She stood without leaning for the first 3 breaths of any council now, as if the high chest wound had to be taught who was in charge. Colin's packing stayed clean. Fever had not won. Anger still did better watch than herbs. Not speeches. Counts. Bearer's chalk plank came up first. Able bodies near 3/4 after the road work and the night runners. Wounded and small full ration held under 3 keys, Runa, Bearer, war chest and winter chest split and labeled so no hero could borrow seed for glory. Harrick's men had been seen counting our stacks from the landlord path, and had raised chalk at them until they remembered free-door tallies were not invitations. Leaf arrived with salt dried white in his light brown hair and the steering bench chalk still on his fingers. 16, neck scar from Rold's chain still a pale ring, and no longer trying to sound like his father's hall when the work was oars. Stormbreaker is damaged and willing, he said. Rope better than yesterday. Freeboard honest. Stores thin. I can take her toward the gate on a living crew. I will not invent a corpse road to cheat the clock. I will not beach her as a gift on anyone's pride. Good, I said. Ship stays a living deck under the oath. Stones stay a consented base, not a seized seat. No third kingdom between them. Old Finn drove his staff into shingle. Law first where law can still walk. War second where war is already standing on the gate. Do not reverse those because a pale count makes your blood itch. Sigrid held her board like a small spear. 12 years old and better at numbers than half the men who wanted to shout. The living face I was still learning, Rune Sight had priced the old one out of my head forever, looked ordinary and sharp. 9 ships. Sea gate. Road closed. Dead named. Copy runners already out on cleft and sheep path. Fees accrue if anyone forgets a line. On my tally, I said, and meant the joke the way we meant bread, daily, necessary, not free. Hava and Runa stood at the notch edge with the posture of people who had organized an evacuation before their son arrived and would hold ashore after he sailed. My father did not ask me to stay forever. He asked what of the house, field, landing, and water if I died at a gate I did not yet hold. We settle that before we paint ourselves brave, I said. Lawful. Witnessed. Paid. Not a landlord's pity and not a god's tip. Runa's hand found the back of my neck, inventory of vertebrae, mother math. Then do not spend your sister's face again for a cleaner map. Ordinary eyes. Ordinary fees. Sigrid, without looking up, said, fees still apply. Johnny Redhand counted hooks and told Shore Teens freeboard was still a religion. Ingrid tallied deck spears versus wound light for shore. Solvig improved rope. Toby chalked soft lumber. Bay ran ward watch signals so listening never belonged to one frayed rope. So Hill picked sail versus stone. Colin forbade fantasy musters with a wound list. Harrick Shorent arrived late enough to pretend he had been invited, sour as old way, cloak too clean for a man who claimed the shore owned him more than he owned it. If you sail to die at a gate, the barns still need a living hand on the rent ledger. Door consent continues, I said. Lifetime service refused. And today we talk purchase, not collar. His eyes flickered. Purchase meant silver leaving his fist's idea of forever. You don't have that kind of weight. League witnesses and salvage shares say otherwise, Finn said. Rock and board. Not your private night arithmetic. Astrid tapped the cart rail. My company sails with the decks that need a fence on wood. Shore keeps a grey stiffening under Ingrid's second. I am not leaving this base naked for Eirik to redefine while we bleed north. And if Sten appears under cloth again, he gets steel first and poetry never, unless the living prove a different debt. Sten remained enemy-shaped in my mouth. Split Harbour's postern still sat in the bones of the coalition. Redemption, if any, was not a story I owed him for free. I opened Spirit Sense once, narrow, north by east, the way you crack a shutter and then close it before the weather owns the room. Distance. Whole purpose. Cold labor still moving under pale discipline, not on our rebuilt throat, on water and whatever other theft Scardy kept in his sleeves. Hounds far. No choir at our teeth. I shut. Nausea light. Spiritual visibility, a brief bell note that faded when I set my hands to ordinary rope. Frager's intensity brushed like a question, more feeling, deeper trance, chase the far dead. I refused. Shut default. Work remaining was ships, law, food, rope, and a gate we had arrived second to. Immediate shape of the day, I said at the notch, plain for frightened ears. First, settle the family shore by lawful purchase and deed while witnesses can still stand without spears in their ribs. That promise is older than Scardy's 9 hulls, and I will not use the gate as an excuse to leave my parents on a landlord's string. Second, staff sail and shore honestly, no empty glory counts. Third, move toward the sea gate on living decks. Fourth, break his blockade if it can be broken without turning us into his reflection. We do not reopen the unburied way. We do not kneel to gods or landlords for a shortcut. Leaf met my eyes. I can promise the ore. I cannot promise we arrive before his cork is fully set. I can promise I won't open wire under our keel to cheat. That's the promise I need, I said. Toughness held my breath steady while fear tried to sell me speed without food. Speed from earlier climbs waited in the calves. Might waited as a quieter hunger. None of it bought a gate. Silver first, Finn said. Then wind. Silver first, I agreed, and the consented base moved from grief after road into the uglier courage of paperwork that outlives a body. We did the land work on the old shore stone above the landing, where rent had been argued for longer than I had been alive and where free ownership had been a joke told with spit. League witnesses stood in a half-ring that made Eirek's shoulders climb, old Finn for law speech, Bearer for Tallies, Un for Freedor memory, Jarny for shipshare continuity, 2 cleft fishers who had eaten our salt and owed us truth, and Sigrid with the board that would make forgetting expensive. Harva and Runa stood as buyers, in fact, even if my hands would move much of the silver. Astrid's grey remnant boxed the stone without turning the deed into a spearpoint marriage. Leaf stood as Stormbreaker's steersman and as a young man who understood inherited claims better than most and had learned not to worship them. I laid out what the wreck voyage, the barrow court, the harbour bleed, and the giant shore had left us that was clean enough to spend, salvage shares from Stormbreaker's witness division, silver taken from hostile hands in fights that had already paid their renown, trade weight from Gullhaven before the plague mark fully closed, and a sealed portion bearer called, not winter seed, not wound broth, not the 3-key stack. No stealing from the small. No stripping the war chest naked. Enough. Eirik sneered on schedule. You want house, field, landing place, and fishing water in perpetuity. That's a lord's joke in a fisherman's mouth. It's a purchase, I said. Price named. Boundaries walked. Witnesses living. Your rent claim ends where the silver clears, and the deed says the shore does not quietly return to you because a war goes badly later. Finn spoke the bounds the way nets get spoken, from the notch pine to the black-tooth reef marker, the house and its yard, the barley strip and potato ground, the drying racks and salt shed, the landing stones and the water rights out to the old float line the grandfathers used when landlords still pretended custom was kindness. Runa corrected 2 lines where memory beat chalk. Harva added the cold cellar mouth and the path that must stay open for neighbors' feet even when pride wanted walls. Sigrid wrote as if fish were counting themselves. House. Field. Landing. Water. Perpetuity. No war debt clawback. No lifetime collar. Fees if anyone loses at the board. Eirik tried a softer knife. Keep the rent seasonal. Safer if your boy dies at the gate. I can be merciful. Mercy that owns my parents is not mercy, I said. Price. We argued numbers until the numbers hurt and then became fair. Made him say aloud that door consent for barn refuge in the giant week was separate and already spent, no double sale. Bera made him initial the war chest versus winter chest split so he could not later claim we had bought land with starving children's bread. Jani made ship shares stay ship shares. The deed was household, not a hidden claim on Stormbreaker. Leaf, carefully, said, my father's name is not on this stone. This is not Sten Silver. This is Harva and Runa's purchase through League Witness. That mattered. I felt Oath Edge quiet and clean on that distinction, no seat theft dressed as family love. Astrud watched Harek's hands more than his mouth. If you send night men to move boundary stakes after we sail, my company will not need a poem to answer. Threats, Harek said. Boundaries, she said. I paid. Silver left our clean purse and entered his. His scribe, thin, nervous, not evil, just employed, wrote the deed twice. Finn read both. Sigrid compared. The cleft fissures made their marks. Unmade hers like a nail. Harva's hand shook once and then did not. Runa did not cry where Harek could farm it, she cried later, private, into the work of packing a house that finally answered to her name. When the last mark set, something in my chest that had nothing to do with saga measures loosened. Core desire, named since before the shrine bowl, secure land so they never again surrendered half the catch or bowed because another man owned the stones under their sleep. Not finished forever, later seasons could still invent taxes and knives, but finished as far as a morning and a rock and living witnesses could finish it. No panel light. No renown. Worthy hostile defeat had not occurred. Lawful purchase is not a monster's head. The saga stayed dark and correct. Thor's banked favor did not twitch, this was not Thunder's hour. Tyr's sense of clean terms sat satisfied without spending. Odin offered no bargain price on the deed. Fraser's path, still equipped to spirit sense, tasted no dead claim on the newly named water, only old grief of rent years, ordinary as kelp. It's yours, I told my parents, and hated how small the sentence sounded against a life of half-catches. Not mine to gift like a king. Yours by mark and weight. Harva gripped my forearm. Then sail without using our fear as your mast. Runa put the deed copy into Sigrid's waterproof wrap as if it were a third child. We hold stacks and doors. You hold decks without owning the shore. That bargain stands. Harek left richer and smaller. Sour. Alive. A landlord reduced to a cellar is still a man. I did not insult him into a future ambush if I could help it. Unraised chalk in a salute that was not affection. Finn stamped the stone lightly with his staff. Founding promise paid in daylight. Now the gate can try to kill you without calling you a liar to your own blood. Astrid's mouth tilted. Romantic. Accurate, Finn said. I looked at the landing that was now Harva's landing in law. Spirit sense shut. Oath edge steady. Level 6. Toughness in the breath. The 9 ships still waited north with Skadi's patience. We moved the deed copy to 3 places, Sigrid ordered, already ahead of me. House beam. Finn's keep. Stormbreaker's sealed locker. Fees if anyone consolidates without witness. Put it on the board, I said. People smiled with their eyes and then stopped smiling because the wind still came from a gate we did not hold. That was right. Joy that forgets the next spear is how free farms become stories told by other people's grandchildren. Mustering a fleet is mostly saying no. We had more fear than hulls, more opinions than rope, and more men who wanted to be seen sailing than men who could keep a freeboard honest under frost iron. Colin's wound list cut the first lie. Toby's soft lumber chalk cut the second. Jani's water count cut the third. What remained could be called a coalition without laughing ourselves into the sea. 9 coalition ships if you counted generously and included 2 heavy fishing craft that had never wanted war, Stormbreaker as spine, 3 Gullhaven survivors that had limped with us since the plague mark weeks, 2 cleft longboats reinforced with our pitch and Ingel's curses, 1 sheep path trader converted ugly and willing, and a narrow runner skiff that was more ears than teeth. 9 against 9 pale. Numbers that looked like fate if you were stupid. Numbers that looked like math if you had watched Split Harbor burn. 6 would be a victory if the gate opens and the last chain road stays reachable, Leaf said quietly to me at the steering bench, not for the wide ears. Hope is not a sail plan. I'm saying the floor. Then we plan to keep more than 6 and accept that the sea may take its tax, I said. No ship is a coin I spent to look bold. Astrid split her company without romance. Grey spears on Stormbreaker, on the strongest Gullhaven hull, and on 1 cleft boat. Shore stiffening under Ingrid's second, enough to keep Harek from redefining deeds at knife point and enough to hold stacks if pale probes came while we were gone. Her high chest wound would sail. She refused the chair with a look that ended the argument before it earned a name. So Hild named freed hands who chose deck versus stone. No one was shoved onto oars as proof of gratitude. Gratitude that needs a shove is just a new collar. They and Dalla set ward watch rotors on every hull that would take them. Shut, open signals, vinegar cloths, work chants, no solo listening, no grief used as a searchlight. Orm's lesson lived in the rotor. I touched the empty prow ring once and did not make a speech at it. Parents held the base. Harver organized boat back watches for returning wounded. Runa held keys and broth logic. Sigrid split herself like a tally stick, one copy of Rolls on Shore, one sealed on Stormbreaker, and made me swear not to open the Shore copies twin for convenience. I swear not to treat your boards as kindling, I said. I do not swear I will never be stupid. If I'm stupid, hit me with the board. Fees, she said, but her mouth almost smiled. Eirik sent a boy to ask if the new deed meant the coalition would pay dock fees like a town. Sent the boy back with a free door reminder and a chalk line. Small wars continue while large ones sail. Finn spoke temporary law at the notch for anyone who needed to hear it again. Consented base remains consent, not seizure. War command of living decks continues under the unfinished oath. Family deed is household property, not a banner for kingship. No corpse roads, no selling small folk to buy wind. I checked my own loadout like a man checking knots. Oath edge equipped, clarity and practiced weapon timing while the war command held. Spirit sense equipped, nearby dead, hunger, traces, looking draws spirits and hounds, shut default. Storm strength rested, bursts, exhaustion, heart strain. Rune sight rested, memory price, narrow focus available if equipped, Raven mark and Lie Scar known refinements not free powers. 2 slots. Swapping would take minutes, nausea, spiritual visibility, real rest. No mid-fight third path. No second swap in one breath of panic. Do we swap before we sail? Astrid asked. She had watched me stare at empty air long enough to know the panel was being rude behind my eyes. Not at the notch with half the shore watching me turn green, I said. Spirit sense still earns its keep on approach if he floats cold labor as bait. Oath edge still rides the decks. We rest for Thor and Odin when we have a pocket without hands on the rail, before the true bite, not during it. If the bite comes early, then we fight with what we wore to breakfast, I said. And we do not lie about it. Leaf-chalked routes, outer line longer because the unburied road was closed, fog bank Skadi loved, the old sea gate's throat where current lied, a secondary cleft if the cork was fully driven and we had to pry from a stupider angle. Ugly options stayed on the bench. Pretty options were for men who had not lost Split Harbor. A horn from the sheep path. Runner. Not pale sails this time, grey cloth on a small boat coming down coast under a truce flag that made my stomach try to leave through my teeth. Sten. Astrid spear tip lowered a finger width. Steel first. Witnesses first, Finn said. Then steel if the cloth is a door hinge again. I felt the unfinished war command hum. Living decks. Not Sten's seat. Not leaf against leaf's will. Split Harbor still lived in the oath's scar tissue even if Tyr had not sealed the gift. Hold fire unless he boards armed, I said. If he talks on shingle under spears. If he runs a Poston trick here, he dies on shingle under spears. Leaf's face had gone blank in the way of sons who have practiced not shaming themselves in public. If he asks for the ship, the answer is shares and law. If he asks for me, the answer is my mouth. If he asks for command as if Split Harbor did not happen, the answer is no. Your mouth, I agreed. Not my leash. The grey cloth boat came on. 2 hard men at oars. Sten in the bow, older than the man who had vanished when the mast broke in the first storm, salt white at the temples, courage still in the shoulders, pride still a weapon he pointed at himself as often as at the world. He raised empty hands. No keys. No Poston smile. I come to the gate, he called across water, voice built for hauls and now forced to work for a fisherman's notch. Not to take your base. Not to take my son like a sack. Skadi bottles the north. I know that gate stones. I built part of its old watch when I still thought rank was a kind of weatherproofing. Astrid did not lower the spear. You opened a harbor to prove a boy could not hold it. I did, Sten said, and the admission landed harder than a boast would have. I was wrong in the way men are wrong when they love a name more than a living deck. I will not ask you to wash me clean with words. I ask to stand where Frost Dead will try the throat, and to put my body between them and the people I trained myself to own. Including my son, who is not property. Leif's hands white on the rail. Say that again, we're witnesses here. Sten did. Finn grunted like a man receiving a board he did not trust yet. Sigrid wrote. Bera watched Hans. The hard men kept oars and shipped as ordered. I did not forgive him for a sentence. Forgiveness is not a dock fee. But the sea gate was real, and skill is skill, and pride walking toward death is still a tool if you do not hand it the keys. Terms, I said. You take no command of Stormbreaker. You take no keys of this base. You sail under Astrid's deck law on whatever hull we assign, or you walk the shore path under Ingrid if you cannot stomach a woman's count. You do not speak for Leif. You do not reopen split harbor arguments as if blood erased them. If you break true's shape again, there is no second grey cloth. Sten looked at Leif, not me, when he answered. I choose you over the seat, he said. If the gate requires a body, it can have mine before it has yours. That is not poetry. That is the only rank I have left that is not theft. Leif nodded once, sharp, eyes wet and furious and young. Then you row where you're told. And you don't call me boy when the iron comes. I won't, Sten said. Astrid's spear tip rose a finger width. Not trust. Use. He rides the cleft boat with my second file. If he twitches wrong, he goes overboard with a spear as a teaching aid. Accepted, Sten said. No renown. No favor tick. A man turning his pride into a shield is not yet a worthy defeat of anything but his own worst habit. The saga stayed dark. Good. I looked north toward the cork we could not see from the notch and felt the day tighten around silver already spent and blood not yet spent. Cast off on the Horn Code, I told Leif. Living cruise. Honest freeboard. Dawn plan becomes noon water. Behind us, the deeded shore smoked ordinary cook fires. Ahead, 9 pale ships set their teeth on a sea gate. Between them, a fisherman's coalition and one redeemed enemy-shaped Earl rode into arithmetic. We left the consented base on a wind that smelled of pitch, old fear, and bread baked for people who might not eat the second loaf. Stormbreaker took the lead because Leif knew her lies and because the Nidhogg prow still made some enemies flinch and some allies spit. The Gullhaven 3 followed in a staggered line Johnny had drilled until even tired oarsmen could hold it half drunk. Cleft boats hugged closer to shore where currents made pale deep hulls awkward. The trader wallowed. The runner skiff dashed ahead and back like a dog that had learned not to bark at every seal. I stood amidships with spirit sense shut and oath edge quiet as a sheathed knife that still knew it was a knife. Toughness kept my breathing from turning into a drum the crew would hear and misread as prophecy. Speed waited in footwork on wet planks. Might waited like a borrowed coat I had not yet decided to put on. Sten sat where Astrid's second file put him on the cleft boat, hands visible, mouth closed, eyes on the gate bearing. He did not try to hail Leif across water with Father Theatre. That alone kept 2 spears from inventing reasons. Orm's absence rode with us harder than any passenger. Ward watchers practiced signals on 3 decks. They slapped a boy's hand when he started to just listen a little, toward a patch of sea that felt empty to ordinary skin. Dalla translated nothing because nothing honest was speaking yet. Good. Sigrid had stayed on shore with Runa by argument and by my order dressed as her choice. Message keeper and tally clerk, not spear-proof. Her sealed rolls rode in Stormbreaker's locker beside a deed copy. I could still hear her fee's voice when anyone, simplified, account. 2 watches of clean water. No corpse rode under the keel. The closed ribbon's absence was a pressure of its own, like missing a rotten stair and still expecting the foot to fall. We paid for honesty with hours. Skadi had spent those hours setting teeth. On the 3rd watch the outer markers of the old sea gate rose, black stacks like broken fingers, a throat of water where the north road narrowed, stone teeth that had once held boom chains and watch fires for living trade. Now pale hulls sat across the useful lines like a hand planted on a mouth. 9. Counted again from the runner skiff by 3 mouths that hated agreeing and agreed anyway. Skadi's blockade was not a mob. It was patience with sails. Outer pickets. Inner cork. Frost film on some rails where cold labor waited under tarps. Not the full corpse road, our shut throat had starved at convenience, but enough stolen dead and frostbitten thralls to make boarding a disease and a fight at once. He wants us to rush the center and break our backs on his best teeth, Leif said. Or crawl the shore cleft and let him peel us one by one. 3rd option, Astrid said from Stormbreaker's rail, shield rim worn, wound high and packed, braid tight. Make him move a tooth where we choose, then break the hinge, not the whole jaw at once. Preserve hulls. Gate open is the promise, not a pretty field of wrecks with our flags on them. Sten's voice carried from the cleft boat, rough, useful. East Stack has a dead angle if the tide is where I think. We used to moor customs skiffs there when honest men still pretended tariffs were not theft. If you put a narrow hole through while the pale shift their line to answer a faint west, you can cut a boom rope or a chain hitch that makes their cork awkward. Astrid did not thank him. She asked 3 precise questions. He answered without embroidery. Leaf listened and adjusted chalk. That was the working shape of redemption, information under spear law, not a song. I cracked spirit sense narrow toward the inner cork. Cold labor. Hunger without breath. A few brighter wrong notes, bound riders, not ordinary thralls. Spirit hounds not close yet, the pale used them like arrows, not weather. I shut before the looking became a door. Nosebleed tiny. I wiped it like spray. Fraser whispered intensity. I refused trance. Shut default. Rest pocket, Finn had said before we cast off, if we found one. Between the last headland and the pickets lay a lee of rock where the runner skiff signaled empty water and no pale small craft. Not safe. Safer than later. Minutes only. Now, I told Astrid and Leaf. Swap before the true bite. Witnesses. No heroics mid-rail. We put Stormbreaker's bow into the lee. Oars held. Johnny cursed the pause and then defended it with bosun religion, better green now than stupid later. Astrid watched the horizon. Leaf watched the steering lines. Finn, who had insisted on riding one Gullhaven hull as lawmouth, was too far for the touch. Johnny and Astrid would witness enough. Saturday. Both feet supported. Breathing controlled. No hostile hand on our immediate rail. Genuine rest as the rules understood it, thin, ugly, real. Unequipped spirit sense. The world went quieter in the place behind the eyes where dead traffic brushed. Relief and loss together. Fraser's favor stayed banked at 1, the path did not crash for being set down. Equip refused a 3rd slot fantasy. Unequip Oath Edge carefully. The war command did not vanish, the sworn shape remained in me like a scar that itches in weather. Clarity of timing left my hands. Tyr favor stayed 1. The gift rested. If I had broken the oath to swap, the seal would have taught me, I had not. I was choosing tools, not fleeing the deed. Nausea climbed. Spiritual visibility flared, briefly bell-like, a marker for anything hunting divine scent. I breathed through it while Astrid's shield set against the rail as if wood could block gods. Equip storm strength. Thor's path came back like weather under the skin, heat, tremor waiting, the stupid joy of force that thinks it is an answer. Bank 3 sat ready to be spent as bursts and refinements already known, hammercast, hearth ward, not as a 3rd slot. Equip rune sight. Odin's cold silver waited in the eye I did not yet open wide. Memory price. Narrow focus available. Raven mark known. Lie scar known. Favor 1. 2 slots filled. Storm strength and rune sight. Oath edge rested. Spirit sense rested. No second swap this pocket. Minutes spent. Green sweat. Hands steady enough. State, Astrid said. Thor and Odin on. Tyr and Fraser banked. Level 6. Renown empty toward 28. Lie scar known, not glowing. Family deed done. Orm still dead. No miracles. Good, she said. Now earn the pause. Leaf's mouth twitched. If you throw the ship with thunder, I will throw you after it. Burst only, I said. Practiced throws. Grounded wards. No continuous god arm. Sten watched from the cleft boat as we left the lee, and whatever he thought of farmers wearing divine weather he kept behind his teeth. Pride choosing usefulness again. We formed for the faint west and the cut east. 9 coalition hulls. 9 pale. The sea gate's throat waited like a question that killed people who answered wrong. I did not open rune sight yet. Memory was not a spice. I kept Thor's strength banked until a hinge needed breaking. Mortal plan first, terrain, timing, Astrid's fence on wood, Leaf's oar, Sten's dead angle knowledge under spear law, Jarny's freeboard religion, ward watch shut defaults. Horn once for feint, Astrid ordered. Twice for cut. 3 if we abort to preserve hulls. No one invents a 4th meaning because they feel poetic. The reckless smile came and died into work. Family land behind us lawful. Gate ahead stolen. Between them, only the next correct knot. The west feint began with noise we could afford and hulls we could not. Two Gullhaven ships and the trader made a loud, ugly show of challenging the pale picket as if we were stupid enough to believe courage was a straight line. Horns. Shields. Smoke pots Solvig had hated packing and now lit with professional spite. Astrid's grey spears on those decks held formation rules shouted plain, stay linked, no chasing wounded pale into deep water, protect oarsman first, kill hook second, do not board a frost rail without pitch ready. Pale answered as Skadi trained them, disciplined, not frantic. Two pale hulls slid west to stiffen the picket. Frost-dead undertarps stood in rows that made ordinary stomachs clench. A nail staff officer, living, coat too fine, directed with a baton that smoked thin cold. Now, Leaf said, and the east cut moved. Stormbreaker, one cleft boat with Sten and Astrid's second file, and the runner skiff took the dead angle by the east stack. Current lied, Leaf told the truth with the steering oar and a string of curses that would have made Runa wash his mouth and then agree with every word. I climbed the shrouds because height still belonged to me more than to most, speed in the calves, toughness in the grip, and looked with ordinary eyes first. Boom rope. Chain hitch. A secondary cable running to a pale inner hull that used the gate's old teeth as a caulking post. Mortal engineering dressed with a little frost binding at the knots, enough to make axes bounce if you were lazy. I opened rune sight with narrow focus on the hitch alone. Silver cold in one eye. Lines of binding like dirty thread. Anchor point not in the rope but in a small iron nail driven into the gate stone where custom officers had once hung ledgers. Steel the nails hold, rope becomes rope again. Cost flicked, a memory of a joke Johnny had told after Gullhaven's first clean water, gone at the edges. I remembered laughing. I could not restore the words by trying harder. I shut the wide field. Kept the nail in mind. Hated Odin with the practical hate of a man who still needed the tool. Nail in the stone, painted like old rust, I called down. Not the pretty knot. The ugly pin. Sten was already moving when Astrid's second opened a path, not leading so much as arriving first at the place his knowledge made obvious. He took a boat hook and a short axe. Frost dead on the pale cable guard noticed and came along the spit of wet rock like a disease learning to walk. File hold. Astrid's second shouted. Shields locked on slick stone. Pitch pots ready. No one stepped into water that smelled wrong. I dropped from the shroud to the cleft boat's bow, Storm's strength still banked. Mortal first. Hook. Axe. Timing without oath-edged clarity, I felt the absence like a missing tooth and did not invent a mid-fight swap to grow it back. Practice remained. Fear remained. Allies remained. Sten reached the nail. A frost-dead spear sought his kidney. He took it on a scavenged shield rim with the ugly competence of a man who had trained fighters for years and had wasted too many of them on pride. He did not look at Leaf. He looked at the nail. Axe. Once. Twice. Stone chips. Binding sparked cold. I put a short Thor burst through shoulders and hips, heartbeat spike, heat, tremor tax already counting, and hammered a boat hook into a frost-dead knee joint the way you break a crab. Not glorious. Effective. Hammer cast stayed reserved, the throw angle was wrong and civilians were not the problem here, deck hands were. The nail came free in Sten's bloody fingers. Rope sagged from magic into mere hemp and ice. The pale inner hull that had used it as a caulking post lurched as current found honesty again. Cut. Leaf screamed from Stormbreaker, and axes rose along our line on the suddenly mortal cable. West, the Feint paid in blood. One Gullhaven hull took a frost ram along the ribs and screamed wood. Johnny's religion held her freeboard by throwing cargo that was not people. A pale grapnel caught the trader, Astrid's spears there cut it with pitch and hate. We were not winning a parade. We were buying a hinge. Rune sight stayed mostly shut. I flicked narrow focus once more on a pale officer's baton, decoy runes crawled along it like insects trained to waste eyes. I did not chase them. Memory was not infinite. I shut. Storm strength I used in bites, one burst to clear a rail, then ordinary muscle and shield rims while the tax shook my hands. Continuous thunder is how men find their hearts stopped and call it glory. Spirit hounds bayed far west where someone on the Feint had opened a grief they should not have. Ward watch signals flashed shut. Phase trainees held. Not everyone would. That was the invoice of a real fight. The east cable parted. The cork shifted from locked jaw to broken teeth. Not open. Openable. Back to hulls. Astrid's voice carried from Stormbreaker as she took a spearman's place at a threatened rail without asking my permission. Her company moved because she moved. High chest wound or not, the fence onward was hers. Sten threw the nail into deep water where no one would rebinding it easily, then took a cut along the forearm that painted the rocks honest. He laughed once, short, ugly. Still not a seat, he said to no one, or to the man he had been. Still a body. We scrambled for boats as pale reinforcements peeled from the center, Scardy's patience finally spending a coin. The runner skiff took 2 wounded. The cleft boat took Sten and the second file. Stormbreaker took me off a rock with a rope that burned my palms and a leaf curse that meant he was glad I was alive. West Feint began withdrawing on the abort 3 horn when the hinge work signaled success. 1 Gullhaven hull lagged, smoking, oars uneven. Pale closed. Arithmetic turned cruel. We can save her if we commit Stormbreaker, someone yelled. We can lose the gate if we do, Johnny snapped. Leaf's face was stone. Run a skiff and 1 cleft only. Stormbreaker holds the cut line. We do not spend the spine to look kind. It was the right ugly call. I hated it and backed it. The runner and cleft pulled living off the lagging hull while her captain, Salt Widow from an older fight, stayed with a rear knot of oarsmen who chose the burning deck over a panic trampoline. Not everyone made it. The sea took tacks. The Pale took a wreck that had been our 9th hull if you counted generously. 8 coalition ships still under command, 1 burning behind us as a lesson. Pale still 9, one of them awkward without the cable. Gate not open. Promise not kept. Day not done. I crouched abaft the mast with Thor tremor in my arms and a memory hole where a joke had been, and told myself the next correct knot still existed. Again, Astrid said, blood on her shield rim, not all of it hers. Hinge wider. Then throat. Sten, bandaged crude on the cleft boat, lifted his good hand toward the east stack's second hitch point. There. And the west boom will try to close when Scardy stops enjoying our education. Leaf chalked. Sigrid was not here to fee us, Bearer's deputy on Stormbreaker wrote anyway. The drowned North did not care that we had already paid silver at a law stone that morning. We turned back toward the Teeth. The second bite was boarding and disease and the particular hate of men who refused to become cargo. Pale inner ships pressed the cut we had made, trying to seal it with hulls and hooks instead of 1 clever cable. Frost Dead came over rails with eyes like old coins and hands that did not mind losing fingers. Living thralls, some bound by hunger, some by nail fear, some by choices I did not have time to try, came behind with spears and grapnels. Above them, on a taller pale prow, a figure in white grayscale that was not male and not honest hide sat a thing like a horse if horses were built out of stormbone and spite. Death Rider. Not a storybook chooser of the slain with borrowed glory. An invented predator of this drowned North, a bound rider that hunted command knots and broke them by fear. Do not duel it for poetry, Astrid said, already moving her fence toward the most likely boarding line. Kill its landing. Burn its hooks. If it wants a single name, give it a formation instead. I kept rune sight shut until a binding made ordinary axes bounce. Storm strength banked between bursts. The war command still itched without oath edge equipped, defend living decks. I could still obey a swan shape with mortal hands. First boarding hit Stormbreaker's waist. Shields. Pitch. Boat hooks. Johnny roared freeboard counts like prayers. Ingrid's shore-trained spears, those who had sailed, held a hinge at the mast. I took a Frostdead's wrist and broke it with a short burst that left my bicep twitching, then finished with a fish knife because knives do not require thunder. Colin dragged a screaming oarsman back before panic became a second enemy. Dalla shouted a word in a thrall's birth tongue that made 2 living attackers hesitate long enough for spears to find them, not magic, memory of markets and coasts. West, a Gullhaven hull took a worse boarding. Sten's cleft boat rammed a pale grapnel ship at an angle that ruined both captains' days and saved a line of our oars. Sten went over the rail with the second file like a man paying an old debt in the only currency left. He fought without trying to seize command shouts. That restraint kept Astrid from killing him herself. A frost film climbed our outer shield faces, cold meant to lock rims and turn fences into statues. Hearthward stirred as known refinement on Thor's equipped path. I slammed my shield boss to the deck plank, grounded the crawl of frost through wood into the sea's bigger cold, and felt the plank scar black and split. One effect grounded. Object damaged. Physical cold lock bit my forearm through the strap and left skin angry. Not a free miracle. A trade. Ward spent on that crawl. I shouted so no one expected a second grounding without another price. Pitch and motion, don't freeze still. Hammercast waited. I wanted a clean throw at the nail staff officer directing boarders from the pale waist. Angle opened. Practiced spear, yes, practiced, not a stranger's weapon. Burst from shoulder to tip. Thunder in the throw. The spear took him through the ribs and pinned coat to mast timber. Living officer. Hostile. Meaningful. The saga flickered at the edge of vision like distant lightning, not yet a full level climb, part of a connected fight, not the whole worthy hinge. Thor favor sat at 3, the aligned hit warmed the path without an automatic number sermon. I did not stop to count while hooks still bit rail. The Death Rider moved. It did not come first for me. It came for the command not, Astrid's voice, Leif's or, the place where living decks decided not to become meat. Wings that were not wings, rags of storm and seal hide, beat once, and the bone horse hit Stormbreaker's foredeck hard enough to crack a board. Frost and fear came off it in a smell like old shrines and blood left too long in snow. Astrid met it with shield and spear and the left-handed adaptation she had earned the hard way since the island. She did not look at me for permission. Her company braced a pocket around her without being told to die for spectacle. Formation rule plain, hold the pocket, cut the horse's legs, no one alone under the rider's reach, pitch on the rags if they catch. I went for the horse's binding, not the myth. Narrow focus. Room sight open on the girth nail and the bit ring only. Dirty threads. Anchor under the saddle plate. Memory cost snapped, this time a scrap of the path from our house to the drying racks in summer light, the exact color of the dust. I still knew the path. I lost the dust's color. I shut after the mark. Saddle plate center. I yelled. Not the head, the plate. Astrid heard. She took a cut along the already wounded high chest that painted her teeth red and stayed standing because staying standing was her religion. Spear. Short. Ugly. Into the plate seam. The bone horse screamed like ice cracking under a wrong step. The rider's weapon, half scythe, half boarding axe, swept and took a grey spear's shield arm at the elbow. Colin's mate went down hard. The pocket held. I spent another Thor burst to shove the cracked horse sideways into the rail with a hooked spar, heart hammering too fast, vision tunneling, thirst sudden as a slap. Continuous force refused, the body is a counter. Ordinary men piled with boat hooks. Pitch caught rag wings. The rider tried to leap for Leif at the steering bench. Leif did not freeze. He shoved the oar, changed the ship's answer under everyone's feet, and the leap went long into the waist where Sten, somehow aboard in the chaos of lashed lines and shouted transfers, met it with a spear under the ribs and a shield rim under the jaw. Not clean. Not glorious. Father-shaped violence put somewhere useful. Leif. Sten barked, not boy, not property. Stay on the oar. I am on the oar. Leif snarled back, and kept us from broaching into a pale hull's frost ram. The Death Rider reeled, rags burning, bone horse failing, and still tried to complete a fear break by pointing its empty face at Astrid's company as if names could be unstitched. Astrid stepped into that pointing and put her spear through the place a living throat would be. The bound thing came apart as contract more than flesh, cold, ash, a sound like a banner tearing underwater. The horse collapsed into stem and tar and a nail that I kicked into a pitch pot before anyone pocketed it for stupidity. No one cheered long. Cheering is how the next hook finds your teeth. Astrid planted the spear but and stayed upright by hate and training. Blood shone high on her chest packing. Company, she said, voice raw. Pocket held. Count living. Do not chase Ash into their decks. A grey veteran with a split lip shouted what the whole fence was already deciding, Jarl. Not because I crowned her. Because her own company named the fact of her command in the middle of a deck that had almost become a grave. Others took it up, short, hard, not a hall ceremony. Jarl of the contracted shield company, independence earned in public iron, not granted as my ornament. I did not speak over it. Allies retain victories. The reckless smile showed once, pride for her, not possession, and died into the next rail. Pale pressure eased a fraction where the riders fear not had been feeding discipline. Not retreat. Rebalance. Skadi still held most of the throat. Our 8 hulls, no, 7 still fully fighting, 1 Gullhaven dismasted and being towed ugly, reformed on Leif's horn. Sten leaned on a rail, forearm soaked, side bleeding where a frost knife had found him during the riders' chaos. He looked at Astrid's company chant and at Leif's hands on the oar and something in his face finally put the seat down like a tool he could not afford to carry. Gate stones, he said to me, low. If you want the throat open, someone holds the east watch ledge while the boom gear is smashed. It's a killing shelf. I know the footwork. You need your eyes and your thunder for the pale flagship's hinge, not for dying on a ledge I already owe. You don't get to buy a son with a pretty death, I said. I'm not buying. I'm choosing, Sten said. Leaf over rank. Living decks over my name. If I fall there, you do not put my colors on your mast and call it continuity. You put my body in the sea or under stone and you keep the boy on the oar. Leaf had heard enough. Eyes furious, wet, adult for a breath. Then you hold until I say the boom is gone. You don't get to die early to make a speech. Sten almost smiled. Astrid, Jarl by her company's shout whether Halls agreed or not, flicked blood off her fingers. Second file with him. No solitary redemption theatre. If the ledge can be held by living fools together, it will be. We turned the hinge plan into feet and rope while Frost still smoked on the rails and Thor's tacks shook my hands like a drunk trying to pray. The East Watch ledge was a slab of wet black stone where old customs men had once stood to shout fees at merchants. Now it was a shelf for dying on purpose. We put Sten there with Astrid's second file, 6 spears, 2 hooks, 1 pitch carrier, no banners. Stormbreaker and the remaining cleft boat held a moving pocket of archery and thrown stones to keep pale small craft from peeling them off the rock like limpets. Leaf kept the spine of the fleet in the cut water, freeboard religion loud, refusing every suggestion that we just ram the flagship and trust Thor. I trusted for the amount you trust a storm you invited into your bones, useful, expensive, not a father. Sten climbed like a man who remembered younger knees and refused to apologize to them. Frost Dead came along the ledge from a pale skiff grapple to the gate tooth. Living pale archers tried the open angles. The second file locked shields into a short wall that made the ledge narrower and safer and crueler all at once. Boom gear! Sten shouted, pointing with the axe. Chains. Winch. A frost-slick capstan that could close the throat again if Skadi's captains kept their nerve. Smash the teeth, not the pretty drum, the pawl and the lower pin. A grey spear named Torvi, hard hands, worse jokes, reached the pawl with a hammer while Sten and 2 others took the frost-dead charge on rims. I could not stay on the shelf. Rune sight and storm strength were needed on the water hinge where a pale heavy was trying to shoulder our cut closed. That was the plan's ugly split, Sten's knowledge on stone, my tools on wood, Astrid's Jarl fence wherever the next fear tried to nest. I opened narrow focus on the pale heavy's waterline binding, ice that was not weather, a keel slick meant to make our grapples fail. Memory cost, the smell of Runa's hands after salting, specific, gone to a generic salt. I still knew she salted. I lost the exact smell. Hate. Shut. Hooks high. Keel is a lie, rail is real. Jani adjusted. Grapples bit. Boarding the heavy became possible for people who liked living less than winning. We did not empty Stormbreaker into her. We cut her steering gear and left her awkward, a cork that no longer fit the bottle. Preserve fleet. Gate open. Not a corpse museum with our names. On the ledge, the fight turned. I saw it in glances between my own work, Sten taking a spear in the side and breaking the shaft rather than giving the ledge. Torvi smashing the pawl. Pitch on a frost-dead cluster. A pale archer finding the pitch carrier's throat. The wall shrinking. Sten shoving a young spear behind him with a snarl, all lives, ledge dies if it has to, not you first. And stepping into the gap himself. Frost-dead raiders poured harder, as if Skadi had been waiting for someone to stand still on a named stone. Sten held. Not forever. Long enough. Axe on pin. Pin sheared. Boom gear screamed metal and went slack in a way that made the whole throat's water language change. Boom dead. Torvi screamed, voice breaking. Sten tried to answer and found a frost blade instead, high under the ribs, the kind of wound that makes a man's future short and simple. He went to a knee, then forced himself up because the next dead hand was reaching for Torvi's ankle. Shield rim. Body weight. He took 2 of them over the ledge with him in a grappling fall that ended on a lower tooth of rock in spray and red. Father. Leaf's voice tore across water before discipline could stop it. Or? Astrid and I both shouted, different decks, same need. Leaf stayed on the oar with tears and rage and the steering lines white in his fists. That was choosing too. We could not recover Sten in the minute the throat opened. Pale attention swung. Our job was to push living hulls through the sudden honesty of water before Skadi closed with other teeth. Torvi and 3 spears dragged what they could toward a hanging rope, 2 came back up, Sten's body hung a moment on the lower tooth, then a grey hook caught his belt and people who still had strength pulled. He was alive when they rolled him onto the cleft boat's boards. That almost made it worse. Blood. Foam. eyes finding Leaf across a gap of water too wide for hands. Seat, Sten managed, and then corrected himself with the last pride he had that was not theft. You. Not the seat. You. Leaf could not leave the oar. I saw the choice gut him. I also saw him not hard enough to hurt his neck scar. I heard you. I heard you. Sten's gaze flicked to me, still enemy-shaped in history, useful in the minute. Don't crown yourself on my blood. I won't, I said. Both shapes older than this ledge still held. No seat seized. No son stolen. War command of living decks. You chose him. We saw. Sten Kettleson died on a cleft boat under grey spears while the sea gate's boom lay smashed and frost-dead still clawed stone. Redemption, not restoration. The saga did not light for his death. Allied sacrifice grants no renown by itself. Correct. Cold. True. Leaf made a sound that was not a word and kept the ship in the channel. That is a kind of law. Astrid's company did not chant for Sten. They held rails and killed hooks and left mourning for water that was not full of spears. Finn, from the Gullhaven hull, marked the death with a raised staff and a shout that witnesses had seen a man hold a gate for living decks rather than for a stolen haul. Sigrid was not there to write it, Bera's deputy wrote it anyway. Records are how dead men stay useful without becoming wire. We pushed into the throat. Pale tried to reseal with hulls. We broke 2 attempts with rams we could afford and 1 we could not. Another Gullhaven ship took a death wound along the waterline and began to settle even as her people spilled onto our decks and the trader. 7. Maybe 6 if the trader's hogged keel told the truth about tomorrow. Preserve enough fleet to reach the final chain, I had named as part of the day's promise in my own head since dawn. Enough was not a number the gods printed. Enough was Leaf saying, between teeth, we can still carry stores, spears, and the map teeth if we don't get clever. Skardi's flagship, pale, tall, patient, finally moved from merchant distance theater into the gate's mouth as if the man himself had decided the lesson had gone on long enough. I felt, without spirit sense equipped, the weight of attention like weather. Rune sight stayed shut. I did not spend another memory to confirm what Fear already knew. The chain taker was watching which mortals he would later try to buy. Through. Jani roared. Don't gawk at the pale king like sheep at a torch. We went through on blood and boom metal and a father's last useful stubbornness. The sea gate, for a stretch of water measured in ship lengths and screams, opened. Not safe. Open. Immediate geography of the promise shifted, blockade breakable, broken in the throat if we could keep it broken long enough to pass fighting hulls and deny Skardi the cork. Family land already deeded at dawn felt suddenly far and strangely heavier, like a weight that made turning back into a different kind of betrayal. Sten's body was covered with a sailcloth on the cleft boat. Leaf did not look away from the channel. I put my hand once on Stormbreaker's rail where Orm's rope had been and once toward the cleft boat where Sten now lay, and I did not pretend those losses purchased the same thing. Hold the open, Astrid ordered, Jarl voiced, wound soaking. Kill their Reseal. Do not chase their flagship into a speech. I checked my body, for tremor, thirst, bruised forearm from hearth ward, memory holes, level 6 still, renown climbing somewhere behind the eyes as the connected fight continued but not yet complete. Gate open was not yet gate held and fleet preserved. A worthy defeat was the blockade's function, not a single corpse. Again, I said, to myself more than anyone, and raised a boat hook because thunder is a spice, not a meal. Skardi tried to close the bottle with us halfway through the neck. 3 pale hulls drove at angles meant to crush living ships into gate stone. Frost-dead packed their bows like spare spars. A second Death Rider, smaller horse, meaner rags, showed itself and then held back when Astrid's company turned as one fenced toward the threat. Fear works less well when it has already been named and stabbed once in public. Don't give him the satisfaction of a second duel on his timing, Astrid said. Spears on grapples. Pitch on rags if it commits. Leaf, keep us from kissing rock. Leaf's answer was a steering correction that scraped our outer paint and saved our ribs. 16 going on something harder. Neck scar white. Father under cloth on another deck. Or steady. I spent Storm's strength in the only way left that was not collapse, short bursts time to axe work on pale chain lines and one hammer cast into a grapnel cluster that would have bound our waist to a dying pale ram. The throw's thunder cracked my shoulder in protest. The grapnels went spinning. Tack stacked, tremor, heat, vision swim. I dropped to a knee, drank bad water, got up because toughness from prior climbs made getting up a habit rather than a miracle. Rune sight I opened twice more, both narrow focus, both hated. Once on a false open channel that was a mirrored binding over rocks, Scardy's joke for anyone drunk on hope. Cost, the precise cadence of Harvard teaching me to mend a net eye when I was small, I kept the fact of the lesson, lost the rhythm of his hands. Once on the pale flagship's forward rail where a chain name fragment glowed like a brand underpaint, information for later, not a lever I could pull now. Cost smaller, a joke name Sigrid had called a gull. I still knew she named gulls. I lost the word. I shut and tasted copper. Odin favor at 1 did not rise in a clean visible step I could bank mid-swing, a line seeing still mattered. I did not buy a new refinement mid-battle. Known tools only. Lie Scar stayed inert without a sworn phrase hanging in the air to nick. West of the throat, our dismasted Gullhaven finally went under after her people were off. 6 fighting hulls now if you counted the trader as a fighter, 7 if you were kind and included a cleft boat half full of wounded. Dawn arithmetic whispered 6 of 9 as a flaw we were brushing with our keel. I refused to spend another ship to make a song. Sten's second file, Torvi living, eyes empty, held the east ledge long enough to dump the last smashed winch pins into deep water, then evacuated under runner skiff ropes. The killing shelf stayed ours only as absence of boom. That was enough. A pale ram broke through our outer screen and hit the trader. Hogged keel became broken keel. People spilled. We pulled living out of water that wanted them. The trader died as a hull. 5 clear fighting ships, 1 runner, 1 wounded cleft, arithmetic ugly. If 9 coalition had been the Dawn boast, we were inside the bone of 6 survived territory and still bleeding. No more trades of hull for pride, Johnny said, 3 fingers bloody on a rope. Gate is open. Push through and form outside where we can run if we must. Final chain needs decks, not wreck markers. Astrid agreed with a chop of her hand. Finn's hull signaled ascent. Leaf pushed us through the last narrow like a man threading a needle with wet yarn and spite. Pale tried 1 more Reseal, flagship shoulder and 2 escorts. I looked at Astrid. She looked at the water, not me. Feint the shoulder with smoke and the runner. True weight on the escort steering. Do not board the flagship. He wants your name on his deck. Scardy wanted a conversation. Conversations with chaintakers mid-gate are how free farms become funeral fees. We smoked. We cut an escort steering oar with hooks and a desperate thaw burst that left me vomiting over the rail while speed footwork somehow kept me from following the vomit into the sea. The flagship's shoulder met empty water and smoke instead of our spine. We slipped. Then we were through. Open water on the far side of the sea gate's teeth, grey and wide and not safe, but no longer a corked bottle. Pale hulls behind and among the stacks still fought rear actions. 2 of our ships, Stormbreaker and Finn's Gullhaven, turned long enough to discourage immediate pursuit with arrows and 1 last pitch raft. The rest formed a running knot north by east toward the chain map's later marks as Leaf chalked them from memory and prowl lore. 6 hulls still under living command when the count stabilized, Stormbreaker, 2 Gullhaven survivors, 1 cleft longboat, the sheep path converted trader's sister craft that had hung back and now carried double wounded, the runner skiff. 6 of 9. The sea and Scardy had taken the rest as tax. Preserve enough fleet. Held, barely, honestly. The blockade's function at the gate was broken. Scardy still had ships. He no longer had the cork fully in. Connected worthy defeat, the gate-taking blockade made unable to bottle the North Road as designed. The saga began to rise like pressure behind the eyes, not yet the full level bloom while rear spears still flew. A pale horn called something that was not retreat and not victory, attention, appointment, the sound of a man marking a future purchase. On the flagship rail, small with distance, Scardy lifted a hand. Not a wave. A claim. I did not open gifts at him. I spat blood, wiped my mouth, and helped haul a soaked oarsman onto planks that still belonged to the living. Astrid finally sat because Colin lied with his eyes and said the packing needed a still patient. She sat like a jarl borrowing a bench, not like a victim. Sten? Dead, I said. Chose Leaf. Held the shelf. No seat transfer. No crown on his blood. She nodded once. Good. I won't miss the man who opened Split Harbor. I'll remember the ledge. Leaf's shoulders shook and the oar did not. That would have to be enough until water was less full of knives. Thor's path hummed spent and satisfied in the way storms are satisfied after they knock down what they came to knock. Odin's cold eye cost sat in the holes behind my thoughts. Tyr's rested oath still itched toward completion, Scardy not fully driven, but a living gate rock had been forced open under our keels. Release language was close enough that the war command's worst urgency eased without a clean legal fireworks show. I did not re-equip Oath Edge mid-tremor to force a verdict. Rest later. Truth later. Form and count, I said. Wounded first. No speeches until the Pale can't hear the endings. Far behind, 9 Pale had become fewer in useful position, 2 tangled in their own Reseal failure, 1 burning from our pitch, the flagship intact and patient. Ahead, the road to the last intact chain was longer than any corpse ribbon and still open enough to try. Family deed behind us. Orm under stone. Sten under cloth. Astrid Jarl by her own. 6 ships. Gate open. The day's named work was nearly paid. The saga pressed harder, waiting for the fight's connected end to be real rather than hoped. Toughness held my breathing while might waited like a closed door. We did not get a clean meadow of calm. We got a stretch of water where spears were fewer and the groans were louder, and we used it like gold. Colin worked until his hands shook. Ingrid counted spears that still had owners. Solvig respliced what would hold and cut what would kill us later by pretending. Tovi condemned 2 spars and saved a mast by refusing optimism. Ingel plugged a seam with cloth and pitch and threats. Dalla sat with 2 thralls who had thrown down weapons and tried to become people again. She gave them water and rules, not hugs. They walked ward watch survivors through shut defaults because adrenaline is a choir of its own. So Hild redistributed freed hands between hulls so no deck was all wound and no deck was all pride. Sten's body lay under sailcloth on the cleft boat. Torvi sat beside it with her hammer still in hand and her eyes on nothing. Leaf transferred by rope long enough to stand over his father with the neck scar tight and the boyhood gone from his mouth. He did not ask me to leave. I left anyway, 2 oars length of privacy on a crowded deck being what we could afford. When he came back to Stormbreaker's steering bench, his eyes were red and his voice was flat. He chose me, Leaf said. Not the seat. I will not turn that into a claim on your decks. I will not turn it into a reason to kneel to the next man who offers me a haul with pretty cloth. I will steer. I will bury him when stone or sea is honest enough. That is all I can make true today. That's enough true for today, I said. If someone offers you the earldom in pretty words later, you tell living friends before you swear anything. Plain questions. No scraping you like a board. He almost laughed. It broke. You sound like Finn. Finn is often right. It is irritating. Astrid, rebandaged, standing again against Colin's silent fury, gathered her company on Stormbreaker's waist because the other hulls could see and hearing matters for law that is not written yet. She did not look at me to borrow authority. You named me Jarl in the pocket, she said to them. I will hold that name as contract, not as romance. Service contracted. Shares witnessed. No ownership of your lives by my bed, my blood, or any man's favor, including his. A flick of eyes toward me, dry. If you meant only a battle shout, say so now and we put it down like a tool we don't need. Silence. Then the split-lip veteran, Jarl. Others after. Not unanimous joy, unanimous work. A woman with a burned hand spat into her palm and held it out. Astrid took it. That was ceremony enough for decks that still smelled of frost and pitch. I felt something in my chest that was attraction and respect and the old fear that leadership is a slower kneeling. I let the reckless smile show because she had earned a human face from me, then put it away because Skadi still owned the horizon behind us. Finn crossed by boat with staff and law mouth. Recorded, Astrid Ulfsdottir acclaimed Jarl by her contracted company in public fight. Sten Ketilson dead holding gate ledge against Frost dead, having renounced seizure of sun and ship in witness earlier this day. Seagate boom destroyed. Blockade function broken. 6 coalition hulls fit to proceed. Family shore deeded at dawn by purchase and mark, Hava and Runa, house, field, landing, water, perpetuity. Named work of this stretch, break blockade, preserve enough fleet, settle family land lawfully, on the borders held or holding. Bearer's deputy wrote until the chalk dust looked like snow. I wanted Sigrid's fee's voice and did not have it. I had the deed copy in the locker and the memory of her ordinary face, still being learned. Harek was far south, richer and smaller. The farm did not need my corpse to remain real. That thought steadied me more than Thor's leftover heat. I checked the Pale. Pursuit existed but did not fully commit, Skadi's patience again, or a preparation for a different knife. 9 ships had been the cork count, not all 9 could still fight as a cork. He had lost position more than he had lost his whole fleet. Dangerous still. Not behind us clean. Do we re-enter and hunt his flagship? A hot spear asked. No, Astrid and I said together, then glanced at each other with the irritation of people who hate agreeing in public by accident. Final chain matters more than his personal death today, I added. He is a man. He will keep. If we spend the 6 hulls on pride, we hand him the chain by other means. Leaf nodded. North by east while the gate stays awkward for him. We rest when the next Lee is real. We do not invent rest under his arrows. Thor wanted pursuit. I felt the god's pressure like heat lightning far off, giants, force, finish. I did not obey weather in my nerves. Banked favor and known refinements were tools, not leases on my wheel. Odin wanted me to open wide and read the flagship's whole namework. I refused the buffet. Memories already thinned were not a coin purse for his board game. Frasier, unequipped, was a distant intensity, dead on both sides, grief, the rider's ash. I did not swap back in a blood-slick waste. Tyr's rested edge sat with the unfinished wider war against Skadi still true in the world even if the gate rock had eased the old harbor command's immediate shape. I would re-swear or release cleanly later with witnesses, not with adrenaline. Level pressure built. The connected defeat was coalescing, blockade broken, gate open, fleet preserved at the 6-hull floor, frost dead push denied as a bottling tool. Worthy. Hostile. Meaningful participation with exposure, my blood, my memories, my bursts, my calls. Not distant title farming. I sat on a coil of rope because the body collects invoices. Astrid's boot touched mine, brief, mutual. No speech. Behind us, the sea gate smoked with spent frost and wreck. Sten under cloth. Orm under stone far south. Family under deed. 6 hulls. Skadi's hand still lifted in the mind's eye. When it blooms, I told Finn quietly, I choose might. Gradual. No free healing. No third slot. No lies. Finn grunted. Choose after the light, not before, or you look like a man ordering the tide. Fair. I waited, breathing toughness, while the rear fight died into distance and the saga finally decided the hinge was real. The light came when the last pale pursuit fell back to the gate stacks and our 6 hulls held a line that was ugly and alive. It was not fireworks for the crew. It was pressure resolving behind my eyes into clean marks only I could read. Renown that had sat empty toward 28 filled in a rush tied to the connected hull, boom smashed, cork broken, Reseal denied, Death Rider down, frost dead bottling push defeated as a system, fleet preserved through the throat at 6. Meaningful participation. Hostile. Worthy. Not Sten's death. Not thralls executed after surrender. Not theater. Saga level 7. The measure choice stood open like a plane door. Toughness had been my last climb. Speed the one before. Pattern and need both pointed at the same hunger, force that was not only Thor's borrowed weather, body that could pull a man from water and hold a spar against ramshock without always spending divine credit. I chose might. Gradual. That mattered. No wound closed. High bruises stayed. Thor tremor stayed until ordinary rest. Memory holes stayed empty. Sten stayed dead. Orm stayed dead. The shoulder that hated hammer cast still hated it. Might arrived as a deepening in the arms and hips over minutes, breath stacking power into ordinary motion, a sense that levers bent a fraction more honestly under my hands. Not a giant's gift. Not armor. Adaptation. Measures order now, toughness, speed, might, toughness, speed, toughness, might. Renown empty toward the next threshold, larger again if the pattern held. Level 7. Still 2 slots. Still no third. Thor favor, 3 at the fight start, warmed by protection of living decks and household-adjacent courage at a gate that kept roads open for ordinary shores. I felt it settle at 4, a line deed without a sermon. No spend on a new refinement this hour, hammer cast and hearth ward remained the known Thor tools, both used and paid for in body and timber. Odin favor, 1, thinned by memory costs, not increased enough to brag, seeing true hinges mattered and still left me poorer in the head. Ty favor, 1, banked, oath not broken, war shape eased by open gate rock without a cheap autocomplete that erased Skadi from the world. Frasier favor, 1, banked, unequipped. Equipped still, storm strength and rune sight. Oath edge rested. Spirit sense rested. Lie scar known, inert. Narrow focus, raven mark known. 2 slots. I said the arithmetic aloud for Finn and Astrid and Leaf because secrets about power turn into private thrones. Level 7. Might chosen. Gradual only. Thor favor 4. Odin 1. TYR1. Fraser 1. No third slot. No free heal. Family deed unchanged by this light. Sten's death brought no renown. Sigrid would have feased anyone who rounded those numbers. Bearer's deputy wrote them flat. Astrid studied my hands as if she could see the might arriving. Don't start bending rails to test it. Bend work. I intend to haul spars and not die of poetry, I said. Leaf's mouth twitched without humor. If might makes you steal the ore, I will put you overboard. Or is yours, I said. Deck law unchanged. The crew did not cheer a light they could not see. They cheered the count of living, the open water, the fact of 6 hulls still answering horns. That was better noise. I stood and felt the new measure root through tired muscle. A spar that had needed 2 men to shift took 1.5 of me and still needed a second hand, truth, not fantasy. I let the second hand be Torvi's, because strength that refuses help becomes another landlord. Thor approved in the far weather, rumble without words. His temptation stayed obvious, answer every pale sail with more force. I drank water instead. Odin's attention was cooler, disappointed I had not spent wider sight on Skardi's full name. His temptation stayed obvious too, treat people and memories as pieces. I touched the locker where the deed copy and Sigrid's rolls rode and refused to open rune sight for comfort. No god spoke a clean quest into my ear. Good. Quests with clean ribbons are how men sell their sisters' faces. We buried Sten at sea because Stone was not honest here and delay would turn him into a problem the Frost might love. Leaf spoke few words, name, choice, ledge, no seek claim, steer onward. Finn added law witness. Astrid added a spear tap on the rail that meant a fighter's respect without rewriting Split Harbor. I added nothing fancy. The cloth went over. The weight took him. The drowned North accepted another body without promising meaning. Leaf returned to the oar with salt on his face that was not only sea. Might in my arms did not fix that. Nothing should. Named work of the day, I said at a lashed rail council of hull leaders, plain. Break Skardi's blockade at the sea gate, held. Preserve enough fleet to reach the final chain, 6 hulls held at the floor we feared and accepted. Settle family land lawfully, held at dawn before iron, deeded house, field, landing, water. Sten dead in redemption, not restored to command. Astrid Jarl by her company. Level 7 might taken. We do not confuse this with the end of doom. Nods. Exhausted. Real. Only after that solid seating did I let the next wait into the open air where it could not pretend to be the same problem. Skardi still has ships and patience. He let the cork fail rather than spend his whole teeth today. He will try another purchase. Be ready for words aimed at grief, especially at Leaf. Be ready for gods who like mortal lives as coin. We sail toward the last intact chain marks on living decks and closed corpse roads only. No kneeling. No wire. Leaf met my eyes. If he offers me my father's hall, I will not answer him alone. Good, Astrid said. Because alone is how posterns open. Might settle deeper as the minutes passed, hips, grip, the simple violence of lifting. I used it to move a wounded man more gently, not to crack a spar for show. The reckless smile flickered at the small correctness and died. 6 hulls pointed north by east. Behind them, a gate that had been a bottle mouth hung broken-toothed and watched by pale patience. Ahead, chain map teeth and the kind of destiny that is only logistics until it becomes blood again. Level 7. Toughness, speed, might, toughness, speed, toughness, might. Renown empty. Thor 4, Odin 1, TYR 1, Fraser 1. Storm strength and rune sight on. Family free in law. Friends dead in fact. Fleet enough. Gate open. I breathed, and for a few beats the breathing was only breathing. Might without practice is just a heavier fall. I spent the next watches refusing to treat the level light like a crown. Johnny put me on the same rope teams as anyone with 2 working shoulders. The new measure made the pulls cleaner after the gradual route finished settling, it did not teach knots. Solvik still slapped my hand when I rushed to splice. Tovi still forbade me from testing a cracked spar with a grin. Colin still ordered me to drink and sit when the Thortax tremor stacked with ordinary exhaustion and tried to look like toughness. You want a skill that matters. Ingrid said, blunt as a butt spike. Learn to call a line switch before the line screams. Gods don't hear freeboard. So I drilled with her and the grey spears on deck, timing that oath edge had once sweetened and that now had to be mortal again. Step, rim, hook, give space to the oar, do not chase. Astrid watched from a crate thrown. Colin aloud, Yarl eyes measuring whether level 7 had made me stupid. Again, she said. Your shoulder telegraphs the hammer cast even when you don't throw. Stop offering free letters to anyone who has ever fought you. I adjusted. Mortal coaching. No panel. The saga stays dark for practice, correctly. Renown is not a school prize. Leaf drilled steering signals with the other holes until the 6 moved like a bruised hand instead of 6 separate fingers. He used work the way some men use drink. When he faltered, Finn put a bread heel in his fist and said, grief is not desertion. Desertion is leaving the or to go stare at empty water until the pail right on your back. Sten's absence sat in the cleft boat's new quiet. Torvi cleaned her hammer too often. I did not tell her it was fine. It was not fine. It was true. At a true lee, empty water, no pursuit in the glass, breath controlled, feet supported, I could have swapped gifts again. I did not. Storm's strength and rune sight still matched the work, force for hull crises, sight for bindings on the chain road ahead. Tyr and Frazier stayed banked. No nausea tax without need. No second theatre of spiritual visibility for hounds to mark. I did open rune sight once, narrow focus, on a scrap of frost iron taken off a dead raider's nail, mapping its kinship to older chainwork from rolled stake metal and the barrow quartz lies. Cost, a thin thread of the way the home notch looked at first winter ice, exact blue. I kept the notch. Lost the blue. Logged the kinship with Bera's deputy for Sigrid's later boards. Information without a triumph parade. Lie scar I tested on no living friend. I spoke a sworn practice phrase with Finn, I will not throw this biscuit overboard, then broke it by tossing the biscuit to a gull on purpose. The refinement nicked cold behind the eyes only when I tried to hold the contradiction as if the oath still stood while knowing it did not. Narrow. Sworn phrase shaped. Not a general lie detector. Counters obvious, people who never swear, fog speech, silence, incomplete truths, my wish to see what I fear. I told the council that in plain words so no one thought I had grown a crown of eyes. Good, Finn said. Tools with names less often eat the carpenter. Might continued its quiet arrival into the second hour, forearms, the deep trunk muscles that hold a man on a tilting deck. I used it to brace a shield wall drill while Astrid called errors. When I got a sequence right without god timing, she grunted approval that felt better than favor ticks. That's the skill, she said. Not the light. The light only makes the body a slightly better liar about what it can survive. Practice decides if the lie becomes useful. I wanted to joke. I nodded instead. Ward watch trainees ran shut, open without me as prop. Orm's lesson held. I touched the empty prow ring and said nothing. Night came thin. Cook fires in iron pots. Thin broth. Names of the day's dead said twice, including Sten, including the Salt Widow from the burned Gullhaven, including 3 grey spears and 1 freed hand who had chosen deck and found the end of choosing. No panel light for grief. I slept in turns. Woke to Leaf's foot nudging my ribs because a pale sail had shone far back at merchant distance and then slipped into mist. Still patient, Leaf said. Still hours to refuse, I said. Astrid slept harder than she wanted, fever knocking after the wound's second insult. Colin looked murderous and competent. I stood a watch at her crate without making it a ballad. Far south, Harva and Runa would sleep under a roof in their names. The deed did not make the world kind. It made one theft harder. I checked the horn codes again, because belief without codes is how 6 hulls become 5. Morning on open water after a gate fight tastes like metal and wet wool. We counted again because night steals numbers. 6 hulls. Wounded stable enough that Colin allowed the word, stable, without spitting. Stores thinner. Rope better than it deserved to be thanks to Solvig's hate-powered splices. Stormbreaker willing. Nidhogg prow still an insult and a map tooth. Ward watch rotors rewritten after 2 trainees froze at a seal's bark and needed shame and retraining rather than discharge. Astrid woke with eyes clear enough to command and a body angry enough to require bargains. She stood. She sat when the deck tilted. She did not surrender the Jarl name back to fever. Leaf buried his voice in chalk, distances to the next chain mark islands, water, wind lies, places Scardy could set another cork if we slept wrong. He did not say farther. The absence said it. I walked each hull by boat with Finn when the water allowed, not as king, as tally witness. People need to see that level 7 did not turn me into a man who only stood on the prettiest deck. Might help me climb wet strakes without making a show. On Finn's Gullhaven, an old oarsman asked if the gods had paid us for Sten. No, I said. Sten paid himself. Gods keep their own ledgers. Ours says gate open, farm deeded, 6 ships, dead named. The oarsman nodded, satisfied the way working people are satisfied by unpretty truth. A small craft under dirty white cloth approached from a side mist around mid-morning, not Skadi's pale war canvas, something more like a messenger's compromise. Spears tracked it. Ward watch stayed shut. I did not open rune sight at Feint. Parley distance. Astrid called. No boarding. Words only. If a nail shows, we burn the boat. The messenger was living, a woman with cropped hair, frost scars on her knuckles, eyes that had practiced not flinching. She held empty hands and a sealed stick of the sort Jarls use when they want theatre. Skadi Chaintaker sends terms to Leif Stenson and to the fisherman who collects other men's wars, she called. He offers the earldom of Sten Ketilson restored under open witness, hall, shore rights, and peace from Pale Levi for 3 winters, if Leif takes his father's seat and withdraws storm-marked decks from the last chain road. He offers the fisherman a different mercy, walk away with your free farm and your 6 hulls, and leave doom's arithmetic to those who can pay its true coin. Silence that was not silence, oars creaked, wounded moaned, someone spat. Leif's face went very still. He sends this the morning after my father died holding a gate against his frost dead. He sends this because the gate failed and purchases cost less than another day of rams, the messenger said, almost honest. He also sends a truth he says the raven god will not put in your mouth, remaking the last chain requires a mortal life freely or forced. Odin knew. Odin prefers the coin. Skadi offers you the chance to choose who pays before the gods choose for you. The words landed like cold hooks. I felt Odin's attention sharpen far behind my rested caution, like a smile made of knives. No speech. No denial. The absence of denial was its own filth. Tyr's banked law sense wanted definitions, freely, forced, remaking, chain, life. Freyja's distant grief pressure wanted names of the dead already spent. Thor wanted to throw a spar at the messenger boat. I held still. Lyskar stayed inert, the messenger had sworn nothing. She delivered another man's phrases. Counters held. I did not pretend a refinement made me safe from well-shaped poison. Leif, I said, not as leash, as friend. You don't answer alone. You don't answer now if now is a knife. Leif's hands were white on the rail. 16. Farther under the sea since last light. Seat offered like candy packed with glass. If I take his offer, I become the postern that opens from the inside, he said, loud enough for witnesses on 3 hulls. If I spit without thinking, I may still become it later when grief is quieter and the hall looks warmer. I refuse the earldom from Skadi's hand. I refuse it as a gift that buys the chain road empty of our decks. I will not swear that refusal as theatre for his messenger, I state it as present intent before living ears. If I change in front of you, not in a mist. Finn's staff thudded. Recorded. Astrid's voice cut. And the fisherman's a mercy? All eyes on me. Family farm flashed in my head, Harva, Runa, Sigrid, deed marks, perpetuity. The founding desire completed at dawn and now offered back to me as a reason to abandon everyone else's children to doom's early hour. The farm is already ours by purchase, not by Skadi's permission, I said. He cannot gift me what he does not hold. Walking away while he breaks the last chain is not mercy. It is hiring myself as his quiet oarsman. I refuse. We keep the 6 hulls pointed at the work. We do not sell a life to Odin's preference because a pale king named the price first. If a chain can be remade without mortal coin, we find that way. If gods hate that, they can hate us in daylight. No panel applause. No favor storm. The favor stayed 4. Odin 1, perhaps cooler. Tyr 1. Freyja 1. Level 7 unchanged. Renown empty. The messenger listened with professional calm. He said you would refuse today. He said refusals are openings for better offers tomorrow. He returns a token. She tossed a small object underhand. It arced. Torvi's shield caught it rather than my hands, good training. A ring. Sten's old seal ring, or a twin good enough to hurt. Leif flinched as if struck. How did he? Leif started. Your father traded under many pressures before he chose a ledge, the messenger said, and for the first time something like pity showed. Not all purchases reverse when a man becomes brave at the end. Astrid's spear pointed at the boat's waterline. Leave. The messenger left. Mist took her like a tool being put away. Leif held the rail and breathed. He will use that ring on other shores. He will say I sit with him. Then Sigrid's tallies and our witnesses become weapons, I said. Living boards against pretty seals. You stay on the oar. You stay in sight. If grief makes you stupid, we will stop you without hating you, if we can. If you can't, he asked. Then we stop the stupid thing anyway, Astrid said. That is what company means when songs lie. I looked north by east toward chain marks we still had to reach and felt the next set of knives assemble without walking into it yet. Skardi's offer named. Odin's preferred coin named. Leif's present refusal witnessed. No betrayal played out. No champion fight. No undersea awakening. Named work of this stretch already seated solid before the poison words. The drowned north waited to see whether a coalition that had bought a farm at dawn and a gate at dusk could refuse a king's price without becoming pure enough to die useless. Form on Stormbreaker, I said. We move. Ward watch tight. No one meets pale cloth alone. Leif, I am glad you spoke in front of us. He nodded once, jaws set around a grief that now had a second mouth to feed it. Might sat quiet in my hands. I used it to help haul the messenger's empty water aside as our line turned. A small ordinary motion, and I did not look for gods to grade it. We made the day into rope and distance because the alternative was chewing Skardi's words until they became our only food. Hull leaders met once more lashed in a rolling council. Stores divided by need, not by who shouted. Wounded tagged for the next possible friendly cleft. Chain map teeth ordered by Leif and the Nidhogg Prow's ugly law against Dala's coastal scrap languages and Finn's memory of old trade warnings. Astrid set company rotations that assumed fever might drop her for an hour and refused to let that hour become a succession fight. I restated loadout and limits until even hot spears could repeat them without grinning. Storm strength, short bursts, collapse tacks, hammercast practiced throws only, half-ward grounds one effect through an object that takes the scar. Rune sight, narrow focus preferred, memory cost always, raven mark and lie scar known refinements not free slots. Lie scar only on sworn phrase contradiction. 2 slots. No mid-fight swap. TYR and Fraser banked. Level 7 might gradual. Thor favor 4. Odin 1. TYR 1. Fraser 1. Family deed done. Gate open. 6 hulls. Sten dead. Orm dead. Skardi offered Leif a seat and offered all of us a story about Odin's mortal coin. We refused today in witness. We sail. Repetition is how tired people stay alive. It is a rail in the dark. Torvi asked permission to keep Sten's recovered belt knife for the ledge file as a tool, not a relic cult. Leif said yes if the knife cut rope better than it cut memory. She nodded and went to work. I found a quiet rail and did not open gifts. Memory holes like missing teeth. Mother's mending song long gone. Sister's old face edges gone. I still knew who I loved. I hated that knowing was not the same as keeping every thread. Astrid joined me, moving careful. Jarl, I said, testing the word without mockery. Fisherman, she said back. Don't make either word a collar. I won't. The reckless smile came because she was alive and sharp and not mine to keep like silver. Your company chose right. They chose a contract that works, she said. If you ever try to turn me into your banner's pretty edge, I will charge you fees Sigrid would admire. Fees still bite, I said. And she almost laughed, then winced, then ordered me to stop being charming while her packing pulled. Leif took a turn of sleep under Ingrid's eye. Even steersmen are meat. I stood the oar with Jarni's supervision so the boy could drop without dropping the line. Might made the oar's resistance honest rather than lighter than truth, I still respected the water. Conquest of anything that mattered still began with respecting the next wave. Far behind, pale patience. Far ahead, chain teeth. Between, 6 hulls and a law stone's memory of silver changing hands under free-door chalk. I thought of Runa putting the deed into waterproof wrap and felt the founding promise sit completed behind me like a solid key. Future seasons of tax and treachery could still come, today had not left the key unbuilt. Finn, passing, said, you look like a man about to invent a speech. I'm inventing silence, I said. Better, he said, and went to bully a rope team into living longer. Night's edge came again. We held a moving raft of hulls with watches and horn codes and broth. I slept and woke. Sten visited once in dream, only pointing at a ledge already paid. Orm did not speak. Good. Before true dark, a raven settled on the Nidhogg prow. One eye white with age. Odin's bird. I did not bow. I said, quiet, no coin without informed consent. Not mine to sell. Not his to take as preference dressed as law. The raven left. Gods are rivals, not clerks. Astrid, eyes half closed, said, if you start negotiating with birds, I demote you to bilge. I, Jarl. Leaf, awake again, stared into the dark where Skadi's offer still floated. I meant the refusal. I know. If that changes, you say it before the mist does. I will. The sea gate lay behind us broken as a cork. The family shore lay free in law. The last chain lay ahead, expensive in ways Skadi had begun to name. I stood watch as the 6 hulls breathed, and I let the drowned north remain unfinished without calling unfinished a failure of the day we had closed. Last light made the water look like old iron. We had distance from the gate, enough that the stacks were teeth on the horizon rather than jaws at our ears. 6 hulls in a holding flower for the night, painters ready to cut, wardwatch doubled, wounded inward, spears outward. No one called it safe. We called it staffed. I walked Stormbreaker's length with the day's end state held plain in my mouth so I would not dream it into something prettier. Level 7. Measures, toughness, speed, might, toughness, speed, toughness, might. Renown empty toward the next climb. Thor favor 4. Odin favor 1. Tyr favor 1. Freyja favor 1. Equipped, storm strength and rune sight. Oath edge rested. Spirit sense rested. Lie scar known. Narrow focus, raven mark, hammer cast, hearth ward known. 2 slots. Family house, field, landing, and water deeded at dawn by lawful purchase under league witness. Seagate boom smashed, blockade function broken, 6 of 9 coalition ships still living under Horn. Sten Kettleson dead on the far side of choosing his son over his seat. Astrid Ulfsdottir Jarl by her own company's acclaim after the Death Rider. Orm still under Stone South. Road of the Unburied still closed. No corpse road reopened for speed. Named work resolved before the next knife, land, gate, fleet floor. That order mattered. I would not let Skadi's messenger rewrite the day into a single poison conversation. Leaf stood at the steering bench even at anchor watch, as if the oar were the only grammar left that did not lie. The seal ring waited in Finn's keep, wrapped, not on Leaf's hand, not thrown away where a beachcomber could make a story. Evidence. Wound. Both. He will come again, Leaf said when I stopped beside him. Not only with rings. With faces that look like home. With tallies that say my refusal starved ashore. With Odin's coin named until someone starts looking at their friends like purses. Yes, I said. And we will answer with living boards, closed roads, contracted spears, and plain speech. If a life is ever required, it will not be taken as a god's preferred silent tax. Not if this coalition means anything but 6 tired hulls. Astrid joined us, moving like pain had become part of her gait rather than a visitor. Jarl cloak was still just her old dark blue wool and mail vest, blood cleaned ugly. If Odin wants a king's price, she said, he can stand in a shield pocket and ask with his own blood in the water. Until then, I don't accept pale translations of Raven lore. Finn, within earshot, grunted approval. Bearer's deputy wrote. A runner skiff crew whispered and were told gently to stop growing the story into something with borrowed doomsong and fake holy theatre. Just a mortal seeking with frost-dead labor and a talent for finding the crack in a grief. I cracked rune sight once more before full dark, narrow focus on the northern waters visible skin only, hunting for another cork's binding shine. Nothing close. Cost, a sliver of the sound of Harver's cough in winter, kept the fact he coughed, lost the exact pitch. I shut, eyes wet with irritation more than sadness. Odin's path remained useful and hated. Storm's strength I left unspent. The body was a spent mint. Might's gradual route had finished, ordinary strength felt a shade more trustworthy under load. I hauled a water cask alone that would have needed help yesterday and then asked for help anyway on the next one because culture is a practice. Far off, almost politely, a pale sail showed and vanished, Skadi's punctuation mark. Not an attack. A reminder that refusals are openings if you let them sit without work behind them. Leaf said, very low, when he says mortal life, does he mean me? You? A thrall? A god's joke. He means whoever makes his machine turn, I said. Odin's preference is not nature. Skadi wants us arguing about whose throat while he finishes the knot. We don't play that game on his board if we can build another board. And if we can't, then we make the cost so public and so refused that even gods have to hear no, I said. I don't yet know the carpentry of that. I know today's carpentry, farm free, gate open, fleet enough, you still on our or, Astrid still Jarl, me still woundable. The reckless smile tried to live and became something smaller, truer. I wanted land for them. We got it before the blood. That was the right order. I will not trade it back for a quiet conscience while the North breaks early. Astrid's fingers brushed my wrist, quick, mutual, a human period at the end of a divine sentence. Sleep in turns. Tomorrow the chain marks get closer and the offers get uglier. If you die of poetry tonight I will be furious. Yes, Jarl. I took my turn under a damp cloak with might quiet, toughness holding bruises in place, speed ready in the calves for a horn I hoped would not come before dawn. Around me the 6 hulls creaked their living complaints. Above, clouds hid whatever stars men use to pretend the sky keeps fair ledgers. In the last clear thought before sleep, I set the cliff carefully where it belonged, after the held day, not instead of it. Skadi had named the price of a king, earldom for Leaf, Mercifarm temptation for me, and the claim that Odin knew a mortal life was required to remake the chain. We had refused in witness. We had not resolved the truth of the coin, nor Leaf's longer grief, nor the Raven God's real ledgers, nor the last chain's binding phrase. That work waited on the water ahead like a weather front. Level 7. Farm deeded. Gate broken open. 6 ships. Dead named. Gods still rivals. No kneeling. I slept, and the drowned North, ungate kept behind us, unchained still ahead, held its next knife out of sight until we earned the right to bleed on it. Dawn would come dirty or clean. Either way we would count hulls, check boards, and sail without reopening the unburied way, without selling a boy's grief to a pale king, and without pretending Odin's preferred arithmetic was the only engine left. That was not comfort. It was the ground we would leave from, under living law, contracted spears, and a fisherman's refusal to become a better flagged corpse fleet. I turned on the planks, felt might in the sore trunk of me, and let the dark take the rest as unpaid.